Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, are you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans? It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. David Sherrer, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hey, my name is David Sherrer. I am the owner of Chinwith Games. I make games usually involving cats that you can play with your friends and family.
What about dogs? Do you make games for dogs too?
I mean, dogs really don't play games very well, but I'm sure you could try it.
Okay.
My games probably aren't that tasty to dogs.
Probably not. And so the next part of the introduction is how we first found them, and I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it's probably in one of the author groups because you hang out there with your wife doing, marketing for her.
Yep.
So that would be my guess, but I don't remember. So, but I did promise you, dear listener, that we'd always let you know how we found these people. So there is that. The long and the short it is, I don't remember.
Yeah, I've known about your podcast for a long time, and I do marketing for Chinwith Press, which is Lydia Sherrer and Love Lies and Hocus Pocus. So most people know me by the fact that I do marketing for books, and that's not something that most authors want to know how to do. So I'm always the popular one when I go out to conventions, people asking me for advice on stuff. So it's probably something like that.
I take the same approach your wife does. I get minions for that. Unfortunately, you get to a certain point where you can only marry so many people without converting to certain religions. So you kind of have to find other ways. Subcontract it out, I guess.
Yep.
People frown on polygamy these days. I don't know. They got no sense of humor.
Whenever I got to the point where I needed to hire employees, that's whenever I knew that I need to start taking this job thing seriously.
I get that. All right. So before we get started, we do have to ask you the religion question. Are you ready for this?
I absolutely am.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Okay. So I love all three of those a lot. But if I could have more Firefly, I would do more Firefly in a heartbeat. So
you're not worried they're going to mess it up?
I'm still hopeful though. That one's if there was a Firefly continuation, I read all the comic books after it was done. I even read the role-playing game so that I could get more Firefly content after there was no more Firefly. So I'm hopeful that if they can do a continuation, it would be handled well. But seeing how they have treated Star Wars in recent years, not super hopeful.
Yeah, it's they don't always seem to like the projects they make, and then they end up not treating them as well as they could.
Whenever I saw the multicolored bikes in the Book of Boba Fett, was it Book of Boba Fett? Yeah, I think it was the Book of Boba Fett. When I saw the Power Ranger colored bikes doing a slow motion chase down the street, that was when I put down Star Wars.
Yeah, I can see that. I like some of the Star Wars. I like the old Legends books. It's just, I don't know. On the one hand, I feel for Disney. When they bought the property, George Lucas never met a proposal that he didn't like and didn't say yes to. So you end up with canonically Luke, Han, Leia, etc., Chewie, 3PO, and the ones everyone wanted to write about. They're in places where they couldn't be because if book A is true, then they couldn't have been here in time for book 2 because we know it takes X number of days to get there. So they did have to go through and pick and choose on the old books on what they liked.
Yep.
But those books were good. So they could have just done minimal editing to tweak the timeline, and they could have re-released them all as brand new and had a crap ton of content ready to slam on the market that took almost no work. And people would have been all about it. And they just said, we'll just pretend none of that existed.
I read a book once when I was young where at the very end of the book, or maybe somewhere near the middle, there was suddenly a cameo by Han Solo, Chewie, and Boba Fett. But Boba Fett wasn't trying to capture any of them. I don't remember exactly what happened in the scene. I just know it stuck with me where I was like, how are these characters here? So yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I had I like Republic Commandos. Those were good books. I liked Rogue Squadron. The TIE Fighter books were really, really good. I just loved about the space fighters, all of those stories. Sometimes I understood that the Empire just wanted to have peace. I mean, sure, they were a little tyrannical, but I mean, I don't know. There was a little bit terroristic undertone to the Jedis kidnapping kids and all that. So
Yeah,
it's a complicated lore, and I loved it. And it's a shame that they destroyed it with stupidity.
Yeah, the Young Jedi Knights books basically taught me how to read. I was a poor reader growing up, and I didn't realize that it was not because I was bad at reading. It was because the stuff I was trying to read wasn't interesting to me. I picked up Kevin J. Anderson's Young Jedi Knight series whenever I was in high school and just devoured that. The first book series I ever remember waiting on the next book to come out, because I got to like book 2 or 3 and I was like, wait a minute, there are no more books? How does that happen? Like, it never occurred to me that writers had to write the whole series, and that not all series are just released fully complete, and kind of changed my worldview at that point.
Yeah, for me, it was the Belgariad series by David Eddings that did that for me. I mean, I used to read Stephen King when I was in elementary school, but that was mostly just because I could read the words and it upset the adults. So it was kind of like me thumbing my nose at the system. And then like the teachers were like, yeah, don't read this in class. You're freaking the kids out. And that's when my mom introduced me to the Belgariad. And it was just like, oh. So I feel you. Sometimes books like that will change your life.
Yeah, I read, I was in 5th grade or something like that. And they put me in like a special class for kids who weren't like keeping up with like English and reading, and they had a bookshelf in the back of the class, and it had Julia the Wolves and Call It Courage and the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and the Bruce Covell's My Teachers and Aliens books, like on that bookshelf. It was like right next to my desk, so I would just reach over and pick those up when I got bored in class and start reading them. I read like that entire bookshelf in the class for people who couldn't read well.
Yeah, for me, it was the David Eddings Belgariad series, and it was the Homecoming Saga by Orson Scott Card.
Yep.
Which was the first time I realized books could make you think, because Belgariad was just an adventure story. I mean, it was a hero's journey, sure, but I mean, it wasn't like you're trying to understand the deep intrinsic nature of humanity. But the Homecoming Saga was like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be a god? Because they were worshiping essentially a giant AI in the sky. And so it was fascinating for me. So I feel you. All right. Because we are polytheistic here on the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
Let's say Chronicles of Narnia. That's one my 5-year-old is currently reading through on audiobook. And we love that in our family. My wife's family, in fact, did a family reading of that and The Lord of the Rings and recorded it, so they have their own like audiobook.
So they recorded themselves reading it?
Yep. Like when my wife was like 12.
Oh, that is awesome. I wouldn't have even thought to do that. I know some guys that did the recordings of them reading like kid stories and stuff when they were deployed for their young kids, but I didn't have kids yet when I went to Iraq both tours, so that wasn't something I had to worry about. But I could see like the value of that and how you'd keep that around. Now, is it still on like, I guess if they read it that long ago, is it still like on CD or tape, or have they converted it to modernity?
Oh, they've converted it to like digital format. In fact, we've got a like an audiobook player called a Yodo that uses a credit card sized audiobook cards, and she's Lydia's put it on that so that she can give that to our kids and they can like listen to it whenever they want. And that's one of their favorite things to do, is just sit down with this thing and listen to audiobooks.
Nice.
Like the first thing my 5-year-old had ever bought, because he discovered capitalism like when he was 3, and has been asking me for paying jobs since then. And I try to promote that because that entrepreneur nature is great. First thing he bought when he saved up his money was he bought an audiobook, was The Snow Queen, which is the story that Frozen was based on.
I don't think I've even heard of that one. I just assumed Frozen was something Disney did. I didn't realize it was based on something. Is it from the Grimm's fairy tales?
I am not sure. I've never actually listened to it because they like go off in their room and listen to it, but my son listens to it all the time. I've heard the like first 5 words of that like probably an infinite amount of times.
It's cool. It's cool. I can always Google it later. All right. So, one of the crying shames of adulthood is there are certain questions people no longer ask you. And we just think that's unacceptable here at the Blast and Blaze podcast. So, we're going to ask you this, sir. What is your favorite dinosaur?
An ankylosaurus, because
Oh.
that thing is a tank. It's got the like giant like weapon on the end of its tail, and then it's all armored up. I've loved that ever since I was a kid.
So, how did you first find it?
It was in a bucket of dinosaurs that I got whenever I was little, and like the fact that it came with a weapon sold me on that dinosaur.
Okay. Most of the time, we get people who give us answers based on like Land Before Time and Land of the Lost, the dinosaurs they saw there, because it's kind of formative moments for people. But that's a toy prize box is a good reason.
Yeah, it was like a cheap bucket of plastic dinosaurs from like Kmart.
Yeah.
And I dumped it out and went, this thing has like a mace for a tail and it's armored.
It's like a dinosaur knight. I get it.
Yep, I was really big into knights back then too.
Yeah, I was disappointed to hear when I finally learned in history class that not everyone used swords. Most people just use pointy sticks because swords are so cool. And they're like, yeah, most of the time they just stab people with sticks. Like, okay. So did you ever do the faux knight fighting with your friends? Like, grab a trash can lid and a broomstick and try jousting on the bike or anything cool?
I actually did LARPing for probably 15 years. So dressing up in costume, going out in the woods and hitting people with like foam covered plumbing supplies.
So how realistic was your costuming?
I worked at a Renaissance festival for a long time. So my costuming was not realistic as in like it would have been period. Like it would have fit in back in the day, but it would have been something you would have saw on the cover of like a fantasy novel.
Cool.
The hood, the chainmail shirt with the white shirt under it, and a bunch of pockets for stuff.
Do you still have it so you can like reminisce about the good old days?
I still have it. If I could go back 20 years and do that same LARP exactly as it was back then, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Nice. There's a few funny memes that come out of it, and it's somebody did a staged contest where they found a murdered body and how he polluted the scene with glitter because he was trying to resurrect the dead body. And I know it's not real. I know it was a spoof someone put together, but it still makes me laugh every time I see it.
Yep, I've seen that one.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of the like memes that showed up around that time while I was LARPing that were literally pictures of my friends that somebody found online and put like words over it.
Oh, that's awesome. So your friends have been immortalized in memes.
They have. It is a picture of a Ronald McDonald with his hand out, and there's a guy walking into it. And that's my friend Ron. He staged that picture, and it shows up every time that like somebody posts a look at how dumb these people are, and it was totally staged, and he's famous because of it now.
I assume most of those pictures are staged because I refuse to believe that people are as stupid as some of these memes might have you believe. I mean, I'm sure there are stupid people out there. I've met a few of them, but I don't want to believe it's as pervasive. So I refuse to believe. All right, because we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
So I am a tea fan. My family grew up making gourmet sweet teas and like passing down this recipe for a while. So I make a pretty mean orange mandarin spice sweet tea and a really good apple cinnamon sweet tea.
Now, when you say you make, are you talking about like you mix the herbs together in the perfect blend, or you actually use a product that you produce?
So I used to, when I lived in Atlanta, would go to a tea shop and actually like bag the tea myself. But since I don't have ready access to stuff like that anymore, I buy a certain blend of company's tea bags that have the same thing that I used to make.
Right.
So it's similar enough. So I get black tea, mix it with an herbal tea, and then put flavored teas in with it too.
When I worked at Starbucks, because that was the job I ended up going to when I was working my way through grad school. And they had a Tiavana shop in downtown Philly that I went to, it was around Philly. I don't know if it's downtown. I don't remember, but they were basically like Starbucks was to coffee. Tiavana used to be to tea. And They had this tea that tasted like Big Red gum. And it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Put a little bit of German rocks sugar in it, and it was just perfect. But they went under, and I have never been able to find anything close to that tea. But you find a good tea, they can be. I mean, I prefer coffee, but you find the right good tea. Although, I'm a son of the South, so for us, tea is sweet and iced and diabetes in a cup.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. Pour it on pancakes.
Yeah, basically, it's syrup with a hint of water.
Yeah, I grew up in Southern Alabama, so that
okay. So you get it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what we did. We made tea. Our family reunions were like a bunch of gallons of tea, and everyone would like remark on whose tea was the best. Like that was a mark of pride if your tea was the one that all the aunts thought was the best.
So we did that with chili, not with tea. But I mean, I could see the fun of both.
Yep.
And you probably would need the tea to cool your mouth after the chili. So maybe we should have like merged our family reunions.
That would have been fun.
So have you passed this tradition on to your kids?
My 4 kids are all 5 and under, so they're not
so no.
yet.
You probably don't want to give them anything sweet at the moment.
Yeah, whenever I make it for like special occasions like Christmas and stuff like that, they get a glass that's like half water, half whatever tea we make. And they think it's the best thing ever.
Nice. I remember the one thing that shocked me when it comes to sweetness is, so we have in downtown Virginia Beach, it's near where my mom lives, because I don't live in the city. But when I would go to visit my mom, we'd go to downtown. They have this like royal chocolate place that does like, they make their own chocolates. Obviously they sell pre-made stuff too, but they also sell, they did like a fondue, but it was chocolate instead of cheese. And then they served it with European sipping chocolate, which is like hot chocolate, but way sweeter. And I remember drinking it once and I'm like, my face puckered up and I'm like, yeah, this is too sweet for me. Give me some coffee because this is too much. But there are some people that were loving it. So have you ever tried any of that kind of stuff? Because I know they have some of those stores in Georgia. I've been to some of them there.
No, I'm not really a chocolate person.
Okay.
Which offends my wife greatly because she is a chocolate person. But I always point out that she can have more chocolate.
Yeah, actually, the fact that I didn't my wife got I had one of my readers send me from Switzerland, because that's where he lived, a box of Swiss chocolate, like from a local company there. And his brother was a U.S. citizen, so when his brother visited, he brought it home and then mailed it to us. And she decided it was a good thing I didn't like chocolate then, because she got all of it. Because I'm just like, this isn't any better than Hershey's. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
which I'm told is sacrilegious to people that like chocolate.
I completely understand. I've made that mistake too.
The one thing I will say is one of my readers went to the Hershey Museum in Pennsylvania, I think. They have like an amusement park and they do the fresh, and they brought us some on their way south because they live in Florida. They brought me some a couple years ago on the way by. We met for lunch and we opened that one. And when it comes, like it's within a day of being like off the press and wrapped, it actually does taste better. So I get, the fresh part makes a difference. I was eating it with my niece with our pinkies in the air, and we were talking about like Ode to Bessie. We could tell which cow made this one. It was so much fun.
Sounds great.
How did you, like, obviously you talked about how you got into reading, which makes sense that you married an author. Did you know she was an author when you met her?
Not when I met her. In fact, whenever she told me that she was an author, I was like, this is when our relationship dies, because if she writes something terrible, I'm not going to be able to just pretend that it's good. But then I read her book that she was working on then. It was like a really dark young adult novel with a lot of teen angst and stuff in it. And it wasn't super polished, but it was really good. Like the writing was really good. And you could tell that like it was her first like real attempt at writing something. But she handed me this thing and I'm like, this is good. Like we could do something with this. Like this could be something that goes somewhere. That story never got published, but it was still good writing.
Yeah. So obviously you named your publishing company after the farm she grew up on, you mentioned in the pre-show, which is then became the name of your gaming company. How did you get into producing games?
It was kind of an accident, actually. So we had when me and Lydia got married, we had a 10-year plan of I would make all of the money and she would start her publishing career, her writing career. And after 10 years, she was planning on that being the point where she made enough money that I could retire from my real job, because I was a telecommunications engineer working for a big ISP. And we were about 5 years into this plan, and it was COVID had just happened, and my job went from being like this, I really like to do it, it's a puzzle every time, to overworked, overstressed, well paid, but like just it was a terrible job. I would get calls at like 3 a.m. because somebody typoed something, somebody wrote in a telephone number wrong, and they would be they would have been on the phone with this customer for like 16 hours before they called me. So I get a call at like 3 a.m. and I would complain about that to my wife, and my wife's like, I don't know why you work there anymore. You should just quit. And I was like, what do you mean I should just quit? She's like, I make 3 times what you make. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I'm a highly paid engineer for a huge ISP company. And she's like, yeah, I make more money than you. You should quit your job. So she showed me the spreadsheets, and I'm like, I haven't paid a bill in a long time. Like I'm like a kept husband or house husband. Like I am the trophy husband in this relationship now at this point. So I turned in my 2 weeks notice like the next day, and I took over the marketing, and I didn't know how to do it to begin with. So I was just terrible at it. I was spending a ton of time trying to learn how to do marketing, like virtual marketing over the internet, like Facebook ads and stuff like that. And eventually I got good at it. Like I got better at it. And I realized that I had like a lot of free time where I was just staring at numbers and panicking whenever the numbers went down. And so I'm like, I can't stare at these ad numbers. I can't watch myself lose money and gain money, lose money and gain money. Like it is going to kill me early and give me ulcers. So I'm like, what did I used to do for fun? I haven't done fun stuff since, before I got my corporate job. And I was like, I used to make games. Like when I was a kid, I used to like make board games and stuff. I wonder if I could do that now. So I got a spreadsheet. I wrote down all of the things you could possibly do to a playing card. Like you can draw it, you can discard it, you can put it on the table, you can spin it, you can flip it over, like all that kind of stuff. And I crossed out all the things that just wasn't fun. And then after working with a spreadsheet for about 20 minutes or so, I had like a working game. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a prototype. And I'd seen Steve Jackson make a prototype for a game at LibertyCon one year. And I'm like, I could do that. I could make a prototype. Like that's something that I could do. That's within my capability. So I used all the knowledge I got from that to build my first prototype of my game. And I sat down to play with my wife with it was Cat Magic was the game that we were making. Cat Magic the game. And it was like a 300 card deck. So it was like way too big, and it was terrible. Like playing it was awful because we had too many cards. I had forgotten to put one of the cards in the deck that both of us needed to win. And it was a terrible experience, but I proved that the game functioned. So after pruning some cards, putting the card in there that I left out, and shortening it down, doing a bunch of math to make sure the ratios worked, it turned out to be a pretty fun game. And so I started thinking about like I could actually publish this game. So I hired an artist, which is really hard to do because I would get to the point where I'm like, okay, I would like to pay you money for you to give me art. And then I would go, okay, where do I pay the money to get art? And then I just never hear from them again. And it happened multiple times. My nanny at the time happened to be an artist. And so I hired her, which meant she had a paying art job. So she no longer needed our nannying job, which was kind of sad. But she did our art. I threw it up on Kickstarter. I was thinking I would maybe sell like a few copies of this, but we raised like $46,000 after everything was said and done, and sold over 700 copies of the game like right off the bat. And then that made me start thinking like I can actually do this. I can actually put out games and people would buy them. So this is the game I have coming up on Kickstarter called Outflanked. That'll be on Kickstarter by the time that people hear this. Is my second game, and it was all kind of by accident. I accidentally became a popular game designer.
So, did you use the same artist for the second game for the Outflanked?
No, our first artist that we used was Hannah Wright. She is her Instagram is Gloop Babies, GLOOP Babies. She's a fantastic artist. Our second one is K. Lynn Smith. That's the letter K. Lynn Smith. She's a comic book artist. She does some amazing work. That she did our second game.
Okay. Let me throw that in the show notes. I'll throw that up. Give me just a second, and I will get that on the screen. I am throwing the names down on the show notes so we can track them down. And people want to check out their art, we can help the artist. All right. So we have the art for Outflanked. Let me zoom that in for everybody. So this is the art for the game. There we go. So what is the game Outflanked? Since that's the one you're doing the Kickstarter on right now.
So it's an abstract strategy game, which sounds kind of scary if you're not a board gamer. But what that really means is that it's not like a strategy game like Warhammer 40K is a strategy game. Like it's a 5x5 grid, kind of like a small chessboard, where you put cards down and the cards dictate where you can put your next cards. And you can also put cards on top of your opponent's cards. If you put a card down that has less arrows than the card that they already have down, and the person that has the most cards at the end of the game when somebody can't play anymore wins.
Okay. Where did the idea for this come from?
So there's a gaming store in Louisville, Kentucky called Miso's Game Room, and I was holding a game design meetup there. And this guy came in and he had this game. It was a rudimentary game on a 5x5 grid where you put down cards with arrows on it to dictate where you can play next. And he it needed a little bit of work to be published, but it was good enough to publish as it was. So I asked him if he was going to pitch it to people or if he was going to publish it himself. Like, what was he going to do with it? And he's like, I don't really want to do anything with it. I like designing the games. And so I'm like, well, what if I give you a ludicrously small amount of money for this game, thinking that would like incentivize him to make his own like attempt to find a better price somewhere. And he's like, oh yeah, I would do that. And I'm paraphrasing. It was a little bit more conversation than that. But I took I paid him more than what the original offer was. But we discussed terms on it, and he just wanted to see his name on a box somewhere. So me and him, I took it from there and developed it. His was just 2-player only game. I made it 4-player. I added a bunch of rules for the playing as each individual character. Themed it towards being tied in with Lydia Sherrer's books, with the Love Lies in Hocus Pocus universe, and basically brought it that last mile to get it to market.
So this game, obviously it's 4 players. What is the age range? I'm going to zoom into the pictures that you have on your Kickstarter so people can see. But what would be like the appropriate age, from 9 to 99 kind of thing? You know, the board games will say age range. Yeah. What is it for this game?
Yeah, it says on the box 14 and up for legal reasons, but my 5-year-old played it recently and beat me.
Oh,
he's played a couple times now and he's won both times. But I think my 5-year-old is a prodigy in gaming. I don't think I mentioned Aaron's name, but the guy that originally had the original idea was Aaron Goodwin, and he's going to be credited on the box and on the Kickstarter and stuff like that too.
Nice, and it's cool that you're sharing the love with the other people, because sometimes people can try to hog the limelight.
Yeah, no, this was his game first, and I'm going to make sure that people know that he's involved. He's got first billing on the game, and he shows up first on the Kickstarter under the game designers. Nice. I did put about a year of work into getting it developed to the point where we could publish it, but he had the original idea.
Okay, now this is a game in motion, I'm assuming, for where 4 players are playing. Is what we're looking at on the screen.
That's the ending of one of the games that we played. So what happened here is one of the players could no longer play any cards, and the game ended. So the way that you count victory is who has the most cards wins. most cards visible on the table. And red has 7, which is more than any of the other players. So red wins this round. And the typical game lasts between 15 and 20 minutes, 15, 30 minutes, depending on how much talking you do while you're playing the game. And I've seen games go like 5 minutes and be done. But it's...
So how come purple didn't tie? Because they've got 7 as well. Is because...
Oh, yeah. So purple did tie. All right. So at this point, you would count who has the most arrows.
Okay.
So I haven't actually done the math on this to see who actually won. I just remember taking this picture.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just curious if some games, even if you have the most, but you're also the first one out, like Uno, for example. There are games where there's nuance to to scoring. So I was just kind of asking.
Yeah. So red wins because they have more arrows visible on the board. The arrows is the tiebreaker.
Okay. How long does the normal running of this game take? Like, is it a couple hours?
About 15 minutes.
So this is a fast game. It's not one you need all day for.
Yeah, no, you sit down and play this multiple times in a row. The thing that makes this game really fun, in my opinion, is that you see these character cards that are
right
around. We've added those in as a Kickstarter stretch goal because we came up with those after we did our prototypes. We finalized those rules, and we would love to put those in the game because they completely change how the game's played. Each character has its own special rule, like the Sir Edgar Allan Kipling, the cat down there at the bottom, in gold. He can play diagonally once per game instead of having to follow the normal rules. He gets to break the rules and play diagonally. I don't think I've mentioned how the game is played. Each player on their turn will play a card, and they have to have a card orthogonal, so up, down, left, and right from a card that they already have on the board. And it has to have an arrow pointed to it. It doesn't have to be the same arrow. It doesn't have to be their arrow. It just has to be any arrow pointed to it.
Okay.
So he can break that rule by playing diagonally once per game. And the quote on his card is like, cats go where they want, or cats go where they please, something like that. The lady at the top, Lily Singer, is the in teal. She's the main character of the books. Her special ability is that she can rotate any card touching her cards, and you're always touching your own card, so you can rotate your card as well, which makes for some really powerful plays if somebody's making a charge down the center of the board, and then you just turn the card so that it stops their charge towards you. I've seen it do some devastating effects, and her quote is, "It was crooked," which completely fits with her character.
And these are characters from the Love, Lies, and Hocus Pocus game?
Love, Lies, and Hocus Pocus book series, yes.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry. So do they have to understand the lore, the canon of that book series in order to understand the game, or are they?
Not at all.
Okay.
You can go in it knowing nothing about them. In fact, the gaming store that I go to frequently, Miso's Game Room, the people there that I've playtested this with, like thoroughly playtested this with, didn't know anything about the books before they started, but they love the characters so much from playing it, like the personality you get from playing this game, that they read the books. So we've got some pretty big super fans now, but because of games like this and Cat Magic.
Now, we are recording this before this episode, before the Kickstarter is live by a couple days. So I can't see what the stretch goals and what the benefits and all that for the Kickstarter is. So can you break down, like, obviously, generally you get the physical product. There'll probably be stretch goals and add-ons. So is some of the add-ons like maybe getting the books that the series, the Love, Lies, and Hocus Pocus, or?
Yeah, we've got add-ons for getting all the books from Lydia's series. That's absolutely an add-on for it. The stretch goals have some really cool stretch goals. So one of the first stretch goals is to get these character cards, like I mentioned, added to the game, because we did all of our pricing for it before we finalized these characters. But if we hit that stretch goal, we'll have the extra money to be able to throw that in and put these 4 cards into the game. One of the other things that you can get through one of the tiers is I will make a custom player card for you if you purchase that tier. So you send me a picture of yourself that you want to use, or a cat or whatever you want to use. I'll throw it in Affinity. I'll crop it out, do some stylized like filter on it so that it matches in with what we have here, and print you your own player card.
Cool. So the board is obviously a grid, but it looks like when you zoom in, and let me zoom in, it looks like there's some writing around the side of it that kind of gives the magical vibe. Is that anything specific tied to the books, or what is?
It is. You'll notice there's magical symbols behind each of the characters in the player cards.
Right.
So that is the symbol for the magic that they do, like that they specifically do. The board is the title of the book series has that border around the title of the book series.
Okay.
And it represents the magical language in the book. Incanum is the name of it.
Okay. Is there any expansion plans that allow for more than 4, or are you kind of limited to that?
4 is going to be the most amount of players that you can have for this, but I am already kicking around an idea for non-symmetrical decks to play against each other for an expansion. So you'll get additional characters to play with, and the decks won't be the same. These decks have the same cards in each deck, but the expansion for it is going to be cards themed towards the character that you play.
Okay. Is one of the options for the expansions or the add-ons, I guess, to get like the Cat Magic game and some of the other merch you sell on your website?
Yeah, that would be an upsell. With Kickstarter, after the Kickstarter is complete, whenever you're going to your checkout, you can add on a bunch of stuff. So the additional books, additional games, that's going to be on there. Absolutely. So,
obviously I grew up playing board games, but it was the basics: chess, checkers, Chinese checkers, the standard ones everyone plays, Monopoly. Yep. When you start branching out to some of the more niche games, I have found when I get them, because I have some in my collection I've never played, the rules are written in such a way that it's like, I feel like I need a PhD in this board game just to understand what the hell's going on. They are not written in a user-friendly way. How user-friendly would you rate the instructions that allow people to learn this game?
They are pretty user-friendly. Like, they're slightly more complicated than checkers, less complicated than chess. The rules are the rule that everyone messes up on is that you can't play diagonally, but you can play orthogonally. You can play the orthogonally. You can play the cardinal directions from a card you have. So up, down, left, right from a card you already have on the table.
Right.
And the first time you play a card there, you can't see it in this picture, but under the center tile or space on each of the rows, there's a little the magical symbol is there. Mm-hmm. That's the starting place for your character. So you would put your first card in the very center of the row closest to you.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Now, obviously, the point of the game as a player is just to win, but is there a story element in the game where, like, you're trying to win a magic duel or something like that? Like, what is the in-game?
So in the Love, Lies, and Hocus Pocus universe, the wizards play a sort of wizard chess type game, and it's this game. So if you're reading the book series, and this actually is kind of a nod to something that hasn't happened in the book series yet, because it's something we had planned all along, is to have like games and stuff in the book series. But this is, I think the next book is going to be the game that the wizards play whenever they're competing with each other.
Nice. Now, are the cards that have the characters, are those from the books as well, or are those just for this game?
The cards are characters from the books. The special player cards aren't in the book series, because that's something we thought of after we finalized all of this stuff. But the board and the cards in the book, I believe, are like made of clay, and they're magically hardened clay cards instead of paper cards. But other than that, the game's very similar.
How sturdy is the cardstock material? Is it something the players are going to have to get laminated to save them long term, or
No,
are they
it's
pretty sturdy?
it's a standard playing card, like standard game cardstock.
Okay.
So
Some
it's
some of
designed
them
to be
they
shuffled.
some of them they cut cost by using cheaper materials, and then the games don't hold up.
No, these are I've had. It's the same material that we used to make the Cat Magic card game, and I've had the demo copy of my Cat Magic game for 2 years now, and I break it out at every convention, shuffle it multiple times, and it's my own personal copy. The box has a little bit of wear on it because it gets tossed in a backpack all the time, but that's the only damage to that copy of the game, and it's the same cardstock.
Okay. So for the people that are playing the game, is there, other than just the number of cards on the deck and the number of arrows, is there other mitigating factors for scoring, like the amount of cards you have left in the deck or anything like that, or is it literally just what's on the board?
No, the only thing that matters is what's on the board. So whenever you cover up one of your opponent's cards, you're doing a lot more damage to them than you would think.
I think this is the best picture we have to show what the board looks like, and it looks like a high gloss thick cardboard for the base.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at the image. It looks like it's a sturdy board, because sometimes with board games, as you know, like the material they use is substandard, and if you're playing with family, they can be hard on games.
And this is just a prototype, so the cards and the board will be slightly different whenever it goes into mass production, but not by a lot.
So let me ask you this. Obviously, we want people to back the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. That is the goal. But assuming that, because it does happen, we did an episode where I did a book review of Starship Troopers in like 2017, and I still get people that randomly find it and then send me hate mail because they didn't like my opinions. So there is a chance that people will find this years later. If this gets funded and you end up going into production, is this something that will then be available on your website if they don't catch it in time for the Kickstarter?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have queued up a order of at least 3,000 copies of this thing.
Okay.
We're just waiting for the funding so that we can then go through with that order.
Okay. Is this something that you see? Because I know we did one Kickstarter where they were doing a tabletop game where one of the add-ons was some sort of computer function where they could do like virtual tabletop. Is that something in the future for this? Because it sounds like this would be pretty easy to turn into a simple computer kind of Steam type game.
Yep. Last year I worked with Tabletop Simulator on getting a Tabletop Simulator version of Cat Magic. But after I made it, I went to them and went, hey, I'd like to give this away free for my Kickstarter. And I got told for some reason I couldn't give it away for free. I had to charge people for it. And I'm like, that's not something that I want to do. I want to give it away with purchases. I've already told people that would be one of the Kickstarter rewards, and I could not get that worked out. So I personally have it on Tabletop Simulator because it's a really good way to prototype games.
Right.
I don't plan to release that publicly.
Okay. And what about for the Outflanked game?
Yeah.
Is that something you plan on doing in the future? I don't know what's involved in any of that. That's why I'm asking.
What I mean is I've already built Outflanked in Tabletop Simulator.
Oh, okay.
To use for prototyping. Because it's one of the easiest ways to prototype is build it virtually in Tabletop Simulator, and then you go from there. Like you can play it a whole bunch, reset the table really quickly, and you don't have to be like right in the same room with people. So you can prototype board games on Tabletop Simulator really easily, and I highly recommend people do that because you can make changes instantly that way. But I don't plan to distribute that wide because I wasn't able to come to an agreement on it with my previous game. It might be something we look into in the future if there's demand for it, but out of the 2 years I've been selling games, I've only ever had one person ask me for a video game version of this game, my previous game.
Okay. I know there are people that love to play board games virtually, especially if, the hard part about any kind of gaming is finding a table, whether that's tabletop role playing or board games or whatever, finding interested people to play the game with you. So that's where some of the love of the online tabletop comes from. I just don't know how feasible it would be for these types of games, or if it's, there's even a market for it.
Yeah. I haven't found an audience for that yet. It might come a day in the future where like that becomes where the market is. And if that happens, I'm more than willing to pivot to that, but it's not really on my radar right now.
So how many hours of game testing does it take to build a game where you get to the point where you're at? Like, for someone who doesn't know anything about the process and they're just curious.
So that is a hard question to answer, because what you've got to do, you don't play it till it's good. You play it till it's fun.
Okay.
You can have a game and it'd be a good game, but it's really just a spreadsheet simulator. Like, there's no fun to it. With Cat Magic the game, it took me about 20 minutes to get the rules down, and it took me an afternoon to get the prototype down to being a good game. And the rules didn't really change a whole bunch after that. A few rules were added because of toxic behavior that happened during testing, to limit that, because the first thing I want my games to be is fun. So I want them to have the least room for toxicity as possible. So we put some rules in, like with Cat Magic, one of the cards is a dead mouse that you can give somebody. It's like the old maid. You can't win if you have a dead mouse in your play area. So what we were finding is that one person would win, and then the next game somebody would give them all the dead mice. So they just couldn't win because they had so many dead mice. So we put a rule in it saying that if you have all 5 dead mice, you automatically win the game. And that stopped that from happening. I've only ever seen one person in the wild win with the dead mice strategy, and he won during a Cat Magic tournament that we held at a convention. So that was pretty good to see that it actually has let somebody win. But that rule was put in to make the game more fun. So we play test these games until they're fun, and once they're fun, then we start tweaking it to make it something you could sell.
Okay.
And that could be an afternoon, or it could be a year.
So there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just until it works, and then it's fun.
Yep.
So how do the tournaments work? Is that something that you just do because people are local to you? Because you mentioned, where you're at, or do you schedule them at game conventions? How does that work?
Yeah, we do them at conventions. So what has happened in the past is a particular convention that has my fan base going to it will ask me if I'll run a tournament, and there's 3 conventions now where I've run Cat Magic tournaments. Lexington Comic and Toy Expo. The people in the game room love my games, so they've asked me to run one. LibertyCon in Chattanooga. I've run multiple tournaments a weekend when they have LibertyCon. So I run one on Saturday and one on Sunday, and they're big fans of my games there too. And Imaginarium has asked me to run Cat Magic events. So I ran a tournament, not this last year, because that that was my wife's due date, was on that convention weekend, so we didn't know if we could go or not. So we didn't plan to go to that tournament or that convention this year. So we missed that tournament this year.
Because babies will do that to you.
Yeah. But Steve Jackson was there to pick up the slack. He held a Munchkin event, so people love that there too. Him being a much larger draw and much bigger game designer than I am.
The GURPS guy, right?
Yeah. He wrote GURPS. He wrote Munchkin. He's a super nice guy. I love being at conventions with him.
Okay. With this game, like sometimes, for something like this kind of thing, people might sometimes want to buy for like holiday presents, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever. Is there an option in the Kickstarter where you can buy multiple copies of the base game, or is it something that you have to wait for it to become available on your website?
No, what you would do is you'd get one game, and then at the end of the Kickstarter, whenever you're doing all the add-ons, you would just add on more copies of the game.
Okay. this is something I'm learning is important to ask. For Kickstarters, because of this game, is this going to be available internationally, or are you limited, unfortunately, to the US because of shipping?
So it is going to be available internationally. We do charge shipping for it. So if your country charges $100 for shipping, we have to charge that to you as well.
Okay. Is that something that's disclosed when they look to see if they, if it's something that they'll be able to afford, or how does that process work?
Yeah, there's going to be a chart on our page that says, how much it costs to ship it to other places. So usually it's like Australia, UK, Canada all get specific numbers, and then everywhere else, like all other places, gets a lump of like what the average is. And on that one, it's averaged. So we eat some high shipping, and then we make a little bit on some other shipping that kind of averages it out.
Okay. And so is there anything else about the game that we should ask that we haven't talked about yet?
The Kickstarter goes live August 20th, so it'll be up whenever this goes out. I don't know. It's a fun game. It has made me a local celebrity at like where I live, like the gaming store that I go into, because every time I would walk in with a white box, they would know that I was prototyping something, and they would be like, "Did you bring Outflanked? Are we going to be able to play this game?" And so I would just bring it in, and when I was just going there to shop, I would walk in. I was like, "Here you go. You guys can play this game for the whole time that I'm here. But when I got to leave, I'm gonna have to take it with me." And they would just play it over and over again.
So that leads to the next question. Is this something, obviously it's going to be available after the Kickstarter when it's available on your website, is this something game stores would be able to contact you and buy to sell at their individual stores?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a contact thing on my webpage. By the time that this goes live, it will actually work because we're redoing my webpage right now. But you just send me a message that way. I'll send you an invoice, and you can get as many games from me as you want. We've got a cat-themed store. I cannot remember where it is, but there's a cat-themed store that sells just cat products that buys 10 copies of Cat Magic from me like every 3 to 6 months. And my local gaming store, every time I come in, they're like, check to see if we have less than 6 copies. If we have less than 6 copies, sell it us till we have 6. And they buy games from me every other week.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I can't wait to see how this comes out. So what, obviously, you've got to bring this to fruition from the sales side, but from the creative design, the game side, what are you working on now? What's the next project for you that we can expect to see from your game company?
Well, the next 2 products that I'm putting out, I've already got written, and we're just waiting on art for it. I've got an expansion for Cat Magic the game, because the biggest piece of request, rather, the biggest request I've gotten for it is to make the game 10-player instead of just 5-player.
Okay.
Because people want to play it like it's a party game. They want to play with a whole bunch of people, and they want the chaos to just be like the focus of the game, to be the chaos of the game. So I've got Cat Mischief. It's going to be Cat Magic, the expansion, Cat Mischief, or Cat Magic, Cat Mischief expansion. Yeah, something like that. Like, that's hard to say. It looks good on the box because you got the Cat Magic the game symbol on the box, and underneath it says Cat Mischief expansion.
Okay.
It lets you play up to 10 players, and it adds like more chaotic cards. So cards that do things like everybody passes their hand to the left, or you could swap your hand with somebody else, things like that. Like it's way more chaotic and way less. You can strategize much less in that environment. But that one's going to come out first quarter of next year. Probably March-ish is when we're going to do the Kickstarter for that one. And then we also have a game called Unicorn Roundup.
Okay.
My 5-year-old came up to me one day. He saw me sitting down at the kitchen table with a notebook, which is usually where I go to get out of my office and try to brainstorm on gaming. And he recognizes this as a pattern now. His daddy is working when he's got his notebook. And he's discovered capitalism when he was like 3. So he never misses a beat to ask for a paying job, to ask me for money for him doing something. So he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm making a game. I'm trying to create a new game to make. And he's like, Daddy, I've got a game for you. And he like pulls a chair up and sits down next to me. And he starts telling me about this game called Unicorn Harvester, where you capture unicorns and harvest them to gain the special abilities that they have, to then capture more unicorns and harvest more unicorns, and eventually build cages to keep these unicorns in so that you can harvest them later. And I'm like, man, you're 5, and that's way too bloody of a game. That's way too violent of a game for you to make. So let's dial it back a bit. Plus,
it's basically like Pokemon for unicorns.
Yeah, like plus you can't read yet, so you can't do any. You can't play this game. So let's make a game you can play. So we sat down and we came up with this game, and everybody's given a deck of cards 1 through 9, and there's a deck of unicorns, and the unicorns have a value on them between 1 and 5. And there's fake unicorns that subtract from your score. And every turn you flip over a card, everyone puts down a number. Whoever puts down the highest number wins. There's a bit more rules to it. There's like tiebreakers and stuff like that to go into it that actually make it a unique and fun game and give you some strategy to it. But we came out with a game, me and my 5-year-old, and so
that's awesome.
That game's going to be printed early next year.
What percentage did he negotiate for himself?
Well, he works for Candy at the moment, and for rather cheap. For like, I would get in trouble if I actually considered it wages cheap.
I mean, I do a lot for some Mike and Ike, so I get it. Okay, and where can listeners? Obviously, we'll link to the Kickstarter for the game Outflanked, but where can they find you online? You've got your website for the company. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be more, or are you going to stick there centrally?
So there's going to be more eventually. We're going through a rebranding right now because I just broke Chenoweth Games off from Chenoweth Press. With the release of Outflanked, will be 2 separate things. So because of that, I'm having to rebrand a whole bunch of stuff, and I put all the rebranding on pause to get this Kickstarter going because it's a lot of work to do Kickstarters. So once the Kickstarter's done, I will break off a professional Facebook page and get a account on Twitter. I've got one. There's nothing on it. There's no reason to look at it at the moment because it might even change. And places like that. I'll have an Instagram account, all that stuff. But that's going to wait until afterwards. So you can find all the updates on chenowethgames.com.
Okay. And we will link to all of that. And then as he updates his social media, we can always go back and edit the episode to update the show notes. So that's easy peasy. The last question I have for you before we start the wrap up is, one, can people that, like Aaron did, have a game idea? Can they pitch you, or are you closed for submissions?
It's got to be extraordinary circumstance for me to work with somebody on publishing a game. I'd rather help you develop it, and then you pitch it to somebody who's actually got the infrastructure to get that out there and get you paid what you deserve for it, or to get you to publish it yourself. Self-publishing is the way to go, in my opinion, because you get all of the money, but you take all the risk. So you're going to make as much money as you put into it. So if you want to, advertise on Facebook and want to go to conventions and want to like put the boots on the ground, absolutely self-publishing is the way to go. If you just want somebody else to handle it, it's kind of like in the author world. If you're willing to put in the man hours, self-publishing is the way to go. If you don't have that desire, then look for a publisher. It's exactly like that with games.
Okay. And we normally, this is the part where we would tell the listeners to review, and I'll do that spiel in a minute, but where do they review games? Is there any kind of place where they can go to leave reviews for people? I mean,
Yep. Board Game Geek. So Board Game Geek is the place it's like Goodreads for games. You go there to find out about games. People post their pictures of their copies of said games, and they post reviews. It's a fantastic place to get people to leave reviews for games, and it's just as hard as getting people to leave reviews for books, because if you tell 100 people, maybe 1 will do it.
Yeah, it is the problem. So this is the part where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers and gamers find the right books and games. So do your part. It really does help And if the algorithms on the non-Amazon, non-book selling sites or anything like the ones where I sell my books, I can tell you that they really do tell the computer programs that rule our lives, like, these are the kind of people we want. And so it really does make a difference. So do your part. I will link to everything in the show notes, dear listener. And speaking of tracking people down and stalking them as you do, you can find us on our link tree at linktr.ee, linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the TikToks, the Twitters. We link to our email, Blasters and Blades Podcast @gmail.com. We have our Facebook group and Facebook page. And more importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. Send all the shenanigans to her because our email is for professional purposes only, people. We have our website over there on Spotify's new site. It is a bunch of gobbledygook. So go to the link tree, click the link. You can go to our website on Spotify, and for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. These episodes aren't free to produce, and every penny helps, and we greatly appreciate it. You can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till their hair is dripping with coffee. No, that doesn't work. I'll find something better next week, people. But link is in the show notes. Coffee Brand Coffee website. Code podcast grunts 10% off. You get a discount. We get a kickback. It's American-made company, not a drop shipping company. So they do employ Americans. They roast the coffee here in the U.S. and that matters to you. Then it's a win-win proposition. And I have made it my mission to try to shop local wherever possible. And so I'm encouraging you to do the same, dear listener. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right. Thank you for coming on. Dave,
can I make one more? Your outro reminded me of something. We also
absolutely.
We print in the U.S. We make sure to do U.S.-based artists, U.S.-based everything for my games. So you will not get printed in China games. And we don't do outsourcing, no AI for our art or anything like that. So if you're big on buying USA and buying from actual artists, that's something we're big on too at Chinless Games.
Okay. And you should come back for your next game, for your next Kickstarter back in March or whatever. And we will make that happen because we like being the place people want to come to talk about their Kickstarters.
Yeah. Anytime that you guys need me, let me know.
All right. And with that, we are out. So we will see you next week, people.